Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Year of the Book, and tonight is a night that I would usually be writing, but if you saw my last video, you'll know that I'm not writing at the moment because of burnout. So I did kind of have like a hope in my mind that maybe somehow I was like miraculously feel better and ready to write again. Tonight, obviously, that didn't happen, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to sit down and write. Also realized that I wasn't even going to be able to sit down and do something in the computer, and that's because I start to feel especially bad when I sit down at my desk, um, and that is probably to do with work rather than my creative writing. But because of that, it just makes me not want to go back there in the evenings, even if I'm gonna do something that I might enjoy. My body like has a reaction to it. So I am in on my bed. So what am I gonna do? Well, my partner got this book for me. It's called Writing the Uncanny, and it is essays on crafting strange fiction. So, I realised that I've never read anything about writing, kind of watched videos and stuff, but I've never read anything about writing. So, I am going to have a look at this. It's in the sort of essay form. I recognise the names of some of the contributors. So I'm going to have a read of that and I'm going to see if that's interesting. And I think it's especially relevant to me because one of the things that I've been feeling about my own stories, which are ghost stories, is I feel like quite confident about my character development, and I feel quite good about my kind of scene setting. And I sometimes feel that my like ghost bit, or the sort of the atmosphere, the creepy atmosphere that you want to get in a ghost story. I sometimes feel like I'm not as good at that, and obviously that should be a really main part of, of a ghost story. And I somehow feel like it's not it's not quite what I want it to be. So I hope that I can learn something from having a look at this book, and I will let you guys know what I think of it later. So the book begins by discussing the concept of uncanny itself, which came from an essay by Freud, actually, in the early 20th century, which I think I'd read somewhere before, but I'd forgotten, called Das Unheimliche. So that's German, obviously. Maybe not obviously. Um, being the opposite of heimlich, which is kind of means like homely, familiar. Um, so it's an interesting word because in German you have the word heim, kind of meaning home, or Heimat, which is kind of like a loaded term, meaning like homeland. Please correct me if I'm wrong, native speakers. But you also have within that root Heim, it means like concealed or secret. So the word for secret in German is Geheimnis. So there's the same root in there. So it's kind of interesting. So that's the origin of the word and the concept of uncanny. And it goes on to talk about how it is something unsettling, something unnerving. And this is often like finding the unfamiliar in the familiar. So, for example, if a story is set in the protagonist's home environment, in a familiar environment, but there's something there that shouldn't be there, or there's something there that is wrong. That would be uncanny. So it's really interesting so far. The first essay talked a little bit about the sort of, I guess, a version of show don't tell, but a little bit different. So she talks about the uncanny as being the absence of explanation and absence of details. It's not quite the same as show don't tell. It's kind of just like neither, which I thought was interesting. And it also made me think about in some of my stories, as I was saying, the sort of, I keep saying haunting, but it's not always a haunting in my stories, even though I'd class them as ghost stories. But let's say that the horror element, the unnerving element, is often quite brief. And I've been doubting myself and thinking, like, have I done enough to build up that atmosphere? But the way I'm understanding this is that actually the absence of detail there can in itself provoke this feeling of unnerving, unsettlingness. So it's not that you necessarily need to go into a huge amount of detail to build that atmosphere. My concentration is starting to wane a little bit now, so I'm gonna close the book for the evening. But really interesting, really intriguing book, and I'm definitely gonna keep reading this. Might even make some notes or something. Um, the other essays that I read, one talked a little bit more about female characters and the uncanny, which was interesting. And then the one that I'm currently reading is about comedy, and the uncanny aspects of that, which include, of course, sort of the absurd and the surreal and the things that you can do with comedy that can also be extremely unnerving. And it made me think of um, shows like Black Mirror or Inside Number Nine, or things like The League of Gentlemen, which are ultimately comedies, but they're incredibly unnerving and weird and unsettling to watch. Or, um, something like Twin Peaks, which is often very funny in parts, but also extremely disturbing at the same time. So I thought that that was a really interesting theme to look into more. And this writer, Robert Shearman, also talks about Roald Dahl as well as a writer, whose stories were also often funny, but often really disturbing and weird and absurd and surreal and unnerving at the same time. Um, so yeah, really interesting. Um, I would recommend it to you if you're interested in writing. I don't know, it fits a specific genre, not necessarily horror, but including horror, weird stuff. If you want people to feel weirded out, then I would recommend this book, Writing the Uncanny. Yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye.